The afternoon sun was beating down heavily on the Cardoso mansion's garden when Sophia suddenly realized something was wrong. Little Isabella, in the arms of her makeshift nanny, began to choke on her milk. Desperation gripped Sophia's chest like an invisible hand, and for a second the entire world was reduced to the child's breathing. She acted instinctively, placing Isabella on the ground, leaning her fragile body forward and applying the maneuver she had learned in a crash course in first aid. Each second seemed to last an eternity, and Sophia's heart beat out of sync with time as she felt the girl's life hanging from her fingertips. It was at that moment that Vanessa appeared, crossing the garden with quick steps, and her eyes widened in panic, but not because of the danger her daughter faced. Her reaction was different, screaming at Sophia to back off, accusing her of suffocating her own daughter. Vanessa's voice carried not only fear, but also contempt, suppressed hatred, the silent racism that hid behind smiles at social events. For Vanessa, Sophia's skin color, her humble position, her closeness to Isabella were threats, and in that moment, they became weapons. Sophia backed away, still holding Isabella's arm carefully, as she felt disbelief and anger rise to the surface. She tried to explain, as quickly as she could, that she was only saving the girl, but her words were lost amid Vanessa's screams and insults. The nanny became a spectacle before the eyes of the servants and gardeners who watched silently, tensely, knowing that nothing she could do could stop the fury of a woman accustomed to manipulating the world around her. Each insult was calculated, each accusation a blade that cut not only Sophia's dignity, but her entire history of honesty and hard work. Eduardo entered the garden at that moment, drawn by the noise, and his gaze immediately split between his furious wife and Sophia, still trying to control Isabella's breathing. He stopped, confused, unsure where to look first, feeling a twinge of doubt he'd never imagined existed between him and Vanessa. The scene unfolding before him was impossible to ignore. A woman shouting heated accusations, and a young woman carefully holding the couple's daughter, her eyes teary, her body tense with fear and effort. Eduardo felt his heart tighten, his mind reeling between believing in his wife, who had always maintained an impeccable image, or in the humble employee who had always cared for Isabella with sincere dedication. As Eduardo hesitated, Sophia looked at him, searching for some sign of support, some reassurance that she wasn't alone. But Eduardo's silence, confused and paralyzed, only heightened the feeling of abandonment that enveloped her. Each of Vanessa's screams felt like a public judgment, as if the whole world had stopped to watch the destruction of a simple life. Sophia felt anger rise, but also fear. She knew any false move could be used against her. At the same time, her instincts told her she couldn't give up on Isabella, who was still coughing a little, trying to recover from her choking. Vanessa, sensing her husband's hesitation, intensified her attack. Her words were sharp, rapid, full of veiled contempt and overt racism. She accused Sophia of wanting to hurt Isabella, of being reckless, of not belonging in that environment. Each sentence was measured, designed to wound, humiliate, and isolate Sophia in front of everyone. Some employees looked away, others exchanged tense glances, but no one dared intervene. Sophia felt her throat burn, her eyes water. But she held Isabella tightly in her lap, determined not to let the girl suffer, not even if the accusation became true. Eduardo finally took a deep breath and approached, trying to impose some calm on the situation. He lightly grabbed Vanessa's shoulder, urging her to stop, but his wife seemed to have lost all control. The anger in her eyes was palpable, as if Sophia had destroyed in seconds the entire image of perfection Vanessa cultivated. Eduardo felt tension building within him, torn between the instinct to protect his daughter and the need to avoid publicly confronting the woman he'd been married to for years. Every word he spoke was measured, trying not to escalate the conflict further, but Sophia's desperate gaze pressed him to act. to choose a side. Sophia, sensing Eduardo's hesitation, felt a mixture of hope and fear. She continued to hold Isabella tightly, making sure her daughter was breathing, but each second seemed too long. Adrenaline still coursed through her veins, and she knew any mistake could be used against her. Sophia's mind began to race, remembering everything that had brought her to this point. A difficult childhood, hard work, sleepless nights, caring for children who would never be hers, always believing that her honesty and care would be recognized. But in that moment, it seemed none of that mattered. Vanessa, realizing that Eduardo had not yet firmly taken her side, changed her tone, trying to involve others in the scene. She began calling out servants, pointing at Sophia, recounting every detail with exaggeration and malice. The accusation, previously directed solely at Sophia, now became a spectacle, every word laden with prejudice, with contempt for someone who, for Vanessa, could never be her equal. Sophia felt the weight of judgmental gazes on her, but she did not take her attention away from her daughter. Each cough from Isabella was a cruel reminder that an innocent life was at stake, and Sophia could not allow fear or injustice to paralyze her. As the scene unfolded, Sophia felt a stab of frustration. Each insult from Vanessa seemed to cut deeper, but she could not react with anger. She had to remain calm, protect Isabella, and wait for Eduardo to act. Her gaze swept the garden, noticing the tense faces of servants and gardeners who, though silent, witnessed everything. Every expression, every step, every breath seemed to amplify the weight of the moment. Sophia knew that, to many there, she was just the maid, someone who could be blamed without question, and that hurt more than any shouting or insult. Vanessa, realizing that Sophia was still holding her daughter tightly and carefully, did something unexpected. Her anger mixed with panic. She began screaming even louder, claiming Sophia had ulterior motives, insinuating that the employee knew too much about matters that should remain secret. Sophia's heart raced. She knew exactly what Vanessa was talking about. Weeks earlier, she had accidentally caught an intimate scene between Vanessa and Eduardo's friend, Gustavo. She never imagined that something so private could be turned into a weapon against her. Eduardo, seeing the tension rising and noticing Sophia's look of despair, finally spoke firmly. He demanded that Vanessa calm down and explain the reason for her outbursts. But Vanessa, instead of responding, turned the subject to Sophia, trying to manipulate the narrative once again. Eduardo felt the weight of responsibility fall on his shoulders. He had to decide who to believe, protect his daughter, and still maintain a facade of control in front of everyone. The heavy silence that followed was almost deafening, each second seeming to last an eternity, as Sophia held Isabella, aware that any action now would define the next steps in this story. Eduardo took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. He watched Sophia closely, remembering all the years the young woman cared for Isabella with silent dedication, never complaining or seeking recognition. Every detail came to mind. The birthdays she remembered spontaneously, the child's cries at night, the care she took in the minor illnesses he hadn't even noticed. It was impossible to ignore all that history of dedication. And yet, Vanessa's voice echoed in his head, full of fury and accusations, trying to distort reality. Sophia, feeling the tension rising, began to tremble slightly, not from the cold, but from fear of what might happen if Eduardo didn't believe her. Every muscle in her body remained alert, ready to react if it became necessary to protect Isabella again. She saw the blind trust in her daughter's eyes, the small look that depended entirely on her. And in that moment, Sophia understood that there was no choice. Her integrity, her life, and the child's were at stake, and she could not hesitate. Vanessa, realizing that Eduardo still wasn't taking sides, began to raise her voice even higher, mixing personal insults with veiled accusations about Sophia's family. She spoke of where she came from, what her life represented to society, and the dangerousness of someone who dared to approach Isabella so intimately. Every word was an attempt to manipulate not only her husband, but everyone present. Sophia felt heat rise to her face, anger mixed with fear, but she kept her gaze firmly on Eduardo, as if silently asking for help, as if to say, "You know me. You know the truth." The tiu. Silence that followed Vanessa's screams was heavy, almost suffocating. Eduardo remained motionless for a moment, looking back and forth between Sophia and his wife, trying to decipher the truth in their expressions. Every detail mattered. Sophia's still rapid breathing, the cold sweat on Vanessa's forehead, the way Isabella snuggled into Sophia's arms, seeking reassurance. Eduardo's dilemma grew with each passing second. Trust his wife, who always maintained her impeccable appearance, or believe in the young woman who cared for her daughter with genuine love, despite all their social differences. Sophia, feeling that time was running out, began to quickly explain how everything happened, trying to show that every move had been made to save Isabella, not to hurt her. But Vanessa constantly interrupted, distorting the facts, inserting accusations of hidden agendas, and using racism and discrimination as weapons. Sophia realized that, in that moment, this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a battle for the truth, where her word, her story, and her dignity were at stake, and she needed to resist. Meanwhile, Eduardo began to notice small details Vanessa was trying to hide. The knowing glances, the way she tried to control the narrative, the fear of being caught in something that shouldn't be revealed. He felt a chill run down his spine as he connected the dots. Vanessa's fury wasn't just to protect her daughter, but to protect herself. And Sophia, without fully grasping the full extent of the situation, had just witnessed something Vanessa never wanted to come to light. Eduardo began to understand that this crisis went far beyond a simple incident with Isabella. It involved secrets, lies, and betrayals that could shake the entire family structure. Eduardo took a deep breath, trying to filter the chaos before him. He looked at Sophia, noticing the determination in her eyes, the way she still held Isabella tightly despite her fear. Every gesture conveyed truth, care, and honesty. He compared this to Vanessa's posture, which was now becoming increasingly calculating, projecting fear and anger to cover something she clearly didn't want to come to light. Eduardo felt the tension growing, the pressure to decide in an instant who deserved his trust and protection, while all eyes remained locked in that silent, intense dispute. Sophia, realizing that Eduardo's hesitation could cost her dearly, took a deep breath and decided to speak more clearly, summarizing the facts directly and without beating around the bush. She explained again what had happened, detailing every move to save Isabella without hiding the fear she felt upon seeing the choking girl. Each word was charged with emotion, but also with clarity, as if the truth could cut through the web of lies Vanessa was trying to weave. The garden servants watched in silence, some exchanging surprised glances, realizing that something more than a simple argument was taking place. Vanessa, realizing that Eduardo was beginning to doubt her version of events, escalated her attack, trying to control the narrative with more aggression. She mixed personal accusations, veiled racism, and insinuations about Sophia's life, seeking to destabilize her. But at the same time, her every word seemed to reveal more about her own guilt and secrets. Eduardo began to notice small contradictions, involuntary gestures that revealed the truth behind the fury. And at that moment, the tension wasn't just about the incident with Isabella. It was about trust, betrayal, and the morals of each person involved. Sophia felt the weight of Vanessa's every word like sharp blades, but she didn't let it shake her. She continued to hold Isabella close, feeling her daughter's warmth, each breath a reminder of what truly mattered. The nanny realized that, in that moment, it wasn't just about proving her innocence, it was about protecting the child's life and maintaining her own integrity in the face of a woman capable of distorting the truth to protect herself. The fear was still there, but now mixed with determination. Sophia knew she couldn't back down, even in the face of overwhelming pressure. Vanessa, realizing her accusations were beginning to lose steam, changed her strategy. She began using silent intimidation, a penetrating gaze, and an authoritative posture, as if her mere presence could subdue Sophia. Every gesture was calculated, every movement a warning that, in Vanessa's mind, the maid was nothing more than a threat, needing to be controlled. But Sophia, despite her fear, sensed the fragility behind her behavior. Each attempt at manipulation revealed more of Vanessa's own insecurity, her fear of secrets being exposed. Eduardo watched everything silently, feeling a mixture of frustration and clarity. He began to connect the dots: Vanessa's disproportionate reaction, the way she tried to manipulate those present, the fury that had no direct connection to Isabella's incident. A chill ran down his spine as he realized Sophia had witnessed something Vanessa wanted to keep hidden. Reality began to sink in. This wasn't just an unjust accusation, but a betrayal, a lie that threatened the entire family facade. Eduardo knew he would need to act cautiously, but also firmly. Sophia felt her heart race as she watched Vanessa walk through the garden with firm steps, trying to take control of the situation. Her employer's every gesture exuded arrogance and disdain, but at the same time, it carried an almost desperate tension, as if any slip-up could expose something that needed to remain hidden. Sophia sensed this, and, even tired and shaken, found strength in her own conviction. She could not allow the truth to be suppressed, nor could she allow her daughter to remain vulnerable in front of a woman who prioritized image over real life. Vanessa began to gesticulate violently, using every word to imply that Sophia was dangerous, dishonest, someone who shouldn't be so close to Isabella. But, without realizing it, she let slip small contradictions in her speech, details that Eduardo began to notice. The anger Vanessa projected didn't just come from a fear of losing control. It came from guilt, from the fear that intimate secrets would be revealed. Each aggressive phrase, each exaggerated accusation, served as a thread that, if pulled, could unravel the woman's carefully constructed narrative. Eduardo felt the weight of responsibility grow, knowing he needed to make a definitive decision. His mind raced, analyzing each person's gestures, expressions, and background. Sophia demonstrated courage, care, and sincerity in every movement. Vanessa, though imposing, displayed signs of nervousness and tension that betrayed her own history. Eduardo understood that in that moment, the choice wasn't just about believing one or the other, but about deciding which truth would have a place in the family's reality. He took a deep breath, feeling the gravity of the moment. At any moment, the lie could be revealed, and nothing would ever be the same again. Sophia, feeling the tension growing, held Isabella close to her chest, her daughter's every breath reminding her of what was at stake. Her eyes never left Eduardo's, searching in that gaze for any sign of reassurance, any assurance that she wouldn't be wrongly accused. The weight of the situation seemed to buckle her shoulders, but there was also a flame of determination, an urgent need to prove her innocence and protect the child who depended entirely on her. The fear still lingered, but now it coexisted with the courage born of maternal instinct and a sense of justice. Vanessa, sensing Eduardo's indecision, escalated her emotional attack. She began insinuating that Sophia was untrustworthy, that her presence in the house was a constant threat, and that any carelessness could be fatal for Isabella. Each word seemed measured, carefully crafted to manipulate the eyes and hearts present. Yet, as she spoke, she let slip details about moments Sophia had witnessed weeks before, secret encounters and betrayals Vanessa desperately tried to keep hidden. Eduardo began to piece together, feeling the tension turn into imminent revelation. Sophia felt a chill run down her spine as she realized Vanessa's secret was about to come to light. But instead of backing away, she found strength in her own truth. Vanessa's every gesture, every accusation, now became proof that the employee had always been correct in her silent suspicions. The game of manipulation was being reversed, and Eduardo began to realize that reality was not what Vanessa wanted to project. He felt the need to act decisively, not only to protect Sophia, but also to confront the betrayal that had been hidden for so long. Eduardo decided to break the silence. His voice was firm, cutting through the heavy air that dominated the garden. He faced Vanessa head-on and demanded an explanation for the rumors beginning to form in her mind. His tone wasn't one of request, but of demand. Vanessa tried to maintain her composure, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. Sophia watched silently, holding Isabella more carefully, understanding that at that moment, something much greater than her own defense was about to explode. Vanessa still tried to prolong the charade, swearing it was all a misunderstanding. But Eduardo, attentive, noticed the way she looked away whenever Gustavo's name came up. Her nervousness became visible, her mask of perfection beginning to crack. He approached, staring at her sternly, and the silence of the surrounding employees only reinforced the weight of the scene. Everyone understood that a truth was about to emerge, and no one dared interrupt. Sophia remained silent, but hope was rekindled within her. She knew Eduardo was about to see what had always been before his eyes: Vanessa's deceit and the silent loyalty of someone who only wanted to care for his daughter. The tension was almost unbearable, each second, dragging by as if time had stopped. And deep down, Sophia knew that the revelation would change not only her own life, but also the very fabric of the Cardoso family, which was about to crumble before everyone's eyes. Eduardo, tired of beating around the bush, spoke Gustavo's name aloud, like an accusation that could no longer be hidden. The impact was immediate. Vanessa gasped for a moment, her wide eyes revealing more than any words could. The silent servants exchanged glances, and the atmosphere in the garden grew even more tense. Sophia felt her heart race, understanding that the farce was finally about to collapse. Vanessa tried to react, but her voice faltered. She spoke incoherently, trying to justify encounters, making excuses that sounded flimsy and insubstantial. Eduardo didn't need anything else. He knew his wife well enough to recognize when she was lying. Her every gesture was a silent cry of guilt, and in that moment, he knew the betrayal was real. The marriage, the public image, the entire castle of appearances Vanessa had maintained began to crumble before witnesses who would never forget that afternoon. Sophia, still holding Isabella, took a deep breath. There was no satisfaction in what she saw, only relief that she was no longer truly alone. Eduardo finally saw clearly who was his wife and who was the employee who had dedicated years of her life to their daughter's well-being. The scene didn't erase the pain of the accusations, nor the racism and humiliation she had suffered, but it revealed something that could no longer be hidden. The balance of power had shifted, and Sophia, even unintentionally, had become a central player in the fall of Vanessa's mask. Eduardo turned to Sophia, his expression filled with regret. He asked her to hand Isabella over to him, but made a point of looking into the young woman's eyes first, as if trying to convey a silent apology. For the first time, the difference in social standing seemed to disappear. It wasn't boss and maid, but a father recognizing the value of the one who had saved his daughter. Sophia handed the girl over carefully, and even without words, her dignity remained intact before all who watched. Vanessa, now exposed, tried to regain control, but there was no longer room for it. Eduardo had not only confronted her, but also made it clear that the trust between them was gone. The betrayal and lies weighed more heavily than any social facade she still tried to maintain. The employees, once silent and submissive, now looked at Vanessa without the same reverence. The mask of perfection was shattered, and nothing she could say would restore that image. Sophia, still shaken, retreated into silence. She knew her life would never be the same after that day. What began as an instinctive act to save a child had become a battleground between lies and truth, prejudice and dignity. Despite the pain of humiliation, she held a powerful certainty within her. She would not be forgotten like a disposable shadow. She had proven before everyone that her courage and humanity carried more weight than any unjust accusation. That night, silence fell over the mansion. Eduardo isolated himself in his office, reflecting on everything he had seen, while Vanessa locked herself in her room, immersed in her own poison of pride and defeat. Sophia, for her part, packed her few things and left the house before dawn, without looking back. There was no resentment in her steps, only the decision to no longer carry the weight of a life where she had been treated as invisible. Days later, Eduardo sought her out in her new home, humble but full of peace. He brought no empty promises or speeches of regret, just Isabella in his arms, smiling, extending her small hands to the woman who, more than saving her life, had revealed the true face of everyone in that house. After the scandal, Vanessa began to live as a shadow of the proud woman she once was. Her reputation quickly crumbled when rumors of her betrayal reached the social circles she so cherished. Friends drifted away, invitations dried up, and soon her obsession with status turned into desperation to not be forgotten. What was once luxury and ostentation became nothing more than a memory of a personal empire that crumbled before everyone's eyes. What remained was a tarnished name and a bitter loneliness that even she herself couldn't bear. Eduardo, on the other hand, decided to distance himself from Vanessa, but not with public scandals. He opted for a quiet separation, protecting his daughter from an open war. However, the experience transformed him profoundly. He abandoned his exaggerated concern for appearances and immersed himself in a sincere quest to regain something he had lost years ago: his own humanity. He realized that true greatness lay not in lavish parties or newspaper headlines, but in the ability to acknowledge one's mistakes and care for those who truly mattered. Sophia found a new beginning far from the cold walls of the mansion. With the help of a neighbor, she got a job at a small neighborhood bakery, where her genuine smile and dedication soon won over everyone around her. The trauma she experienced still weighed heavily on her memory, but there was something different about her now, a strength that no longer allowed herself to be reduced to stereotypes or humiliation. Each morning she opened the bakery was like a new beginning, a silent affirmation that her story would not be defined by the injustice she suffered. Isabella grew up surrounded by genuine affection. Even as a child, she seemed to recognize Sophia as an essential presence. Eduardo encouraged this bond, allowing frequent visits, and the child flourished in this unlikely but genuine balance. No matter what people said, he knew his daughter needed the love of the woman who had saved her. Isabella, in the future, would learn that family wasn't limited to blood or status, but to the hands that held her when her life hung by a thread. Richard, the lover who had contributed to the entire ruin, disappeared as soon as the truth began to emerge. A coward, he left Vanessa alone to deal with the consequences of her choices. He tried to reintegrate into other social circles, but the stain of betrayal and the reputation of opportunism followed him wherever he went. His story became just a whispered example at discreet dinners. The man who hid when the storm arrived, proving that his loyalty was never to anyone but himself. Time passed, but the memory of that episode never completely left any of those involved. For some, it was an irreversible downfall. For others, a rebirth. In the end, Sophia understood that she had not just been a maid in a wealthy household, but a witness and protagonist of a twist of fate. What seemed like a tragedy became a test of resilience. Vanessa was left with ruin, Richard with oblivion, Eduardo with the chance to be different, and Isabella with the truth. Sophia, the invisible woman they dared to silence, walked firmly, carrying with her not only scars, but the certainty that her life would never again be controlled by the prejudice or lies of others. Sophia did not win because of power or status, but because she never let anyone take away the only wealth that no one could corrupt: her truth.